Hello, and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and notions discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery, and crack. Today, myself and Bart are joined by our Vigo therapy practitioner, holistic menstrual educator, dance teacher, and women's circle facilitator, Aisling Browne, for a wide-ranging and fascinating conversation about periods.
I had to think about sun and moon cycle is really helpful, and I think this image of the switch for the light, you have like an on-off switch. Yeah. You also have a dimmer switch. I feel like men kind of the hormones for them is like on, like testosterone in the morning, on, and then off at night. And for women, it's like, there's a whole spectrum of what things can go up to full brightness and back down again. And when I teach this work to women of all ages, that it's just inviting in a bit more of acceptance and compassion with ourselves.
Are you ready to start?
I think so.
Ground ourselves.
Do we need to
deep
ground
breaths.
Okay.
And how long do you usually go for? It's
As
long.
long as
6-7 hours.
Okay, grand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
until
you've nothing planned
No,
for
3
today,
or 4.
right?
I can just get some of the
until we have the topic fixed, Aisling.
Yeah. And you can go into the big book. Solved. Crime solved.
Yeah.
No, I am terrible about this because I think technically I've fallen into the role of welcoming the guests, and I always forget to ask how you would like to be introduced. But we will say welcome to Aisling Browne, who is teacher, educator, womb worker.
Yeah. Mother. That sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And master of the full stop.
Yeah.
Because Aisling chose today's topic. And today's topic is periods. Why periods, Aisling?
Because they're my favourite thing to talk about.
It's a great word, isn't it?
Great. Yeah, well, actually, it's not a great word for periods, for menstruation, but it's the common word that's used, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you want to give people a bit of a background to the kind of work you do and maybe why you got involved in it, why it's so important to you?
In our household you are known as w.Aisling.
On people's phones I'm called, Aisling Womb, Woomy, Womb woman, period woman, period lady.
Period lady, Aisling the period lady, yeah.
How did I get into it all? I guess, I don't know. It's personal and professional stories. So maybe I'll share professional one first.
Whatever you feel like, yeah.
Okay. So primary school teacher, and I've been teaching since 2009. And I was teaching in Ireland and then Australia and then New Zealand. And I used to teach, often I'd be teaching kind of 5th, 6th class age group. So girls, 10, 11. And I'd be observing lots of different things in the classroom with the girls, especially with their, emotional behaviors and their mental health. And I used to, as a teacher, you're kind of constricted to what you can do. You're there to cover the curriculum and it's a very jam-packed day and all these subjects to cover. But I felt like we weren't really doing enough for them as they transition from, children to teens and go through these changes. And obviously puberty is one of the, it's a big thing. And we'd give the sex ed day that you have one day and you fit everything in one day and, talk about periods for 1 hour and that's it. And that's all there is. And I felt like we're just not giving these girls what they deserve. They need to have a lot more comprehensive education and support. So that was kind of the professional side of things. And then I went off my own journey and had my own child and had pregnancy and maternity leave. And while I was on maternity leave, I became a yoga teacher and started teaching yoga to teens at school. And then I started teaching yoga to pregnant women as well. I did pregnancy circles, that kind of thing. So I felt like I was really around women and girls when they're going through hormonal shifts. And I started to figure out that this is actually like a really big deal and we shouldn't be ignoring this fact that we are cyclical women and hormones have a huge impact on our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual selves. So that kind of led me onto a self-directed path. I love learning, so I got really, if I like something, I get obsessed with it, not just dabble, I just go all in. So I think I read about 11 books when I was pregnant on birth, and I read, loads of books about menstruation. I was living in New Zealand at the time, so I got to learn a lot about menstruation from the lens of the Maori spirituality, which was really impactful on me as well. I'm talking so much, so
no, this is
come
perfect.
on, chime in.
Well, this is why we asked you on.
Yes.
And once we get started, there's no stopping us.
And with all due respect, Aisling, you probably have a little bit more to say about motherhood and menstruation than me and Bart do.
Oh, maybe, yes, true.
So I'm passing out the notebooks because you were chatting and my brain was firing as well. So if you want to make any notes as you go, Aisling,
like
that's just there
right.
for the guests. But that's so fascinating that you came into contact with the stages of, you know, I often think about this, that as men, we don't have many biologically triggered stages of growth, right? You go from boys and you go through puberty, and then you basically are the same. You grow up and then you grow out and then you die, you know, like there's not too much happens. But like you were saying, when girls are coming into like menarche and puberty and so on, and then there's a change before and after that, then there's a change before and after motherhood as well, and that's both menopause. The child and then menopause, of course, and then of course the change of motherhood is a lifestyle change, a spiritual change. It's also a biological change as well, because I know the work you do with w.Aisling Massage is so providing so much like hands-on physical care for the body of somebody who's just given birth, you know, which obviously is such a tremendous physical experience to go through, and we have in the Western world so little aftercare for it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and there's so much there that can be done, and you know, unfortunately it's not the physical changes that happen, but there's so much, like you said, emotional, spiritual, and there's extra layers of, you know, what's very common here unfortunately is like birth trauma. So you're also supporting the woman to heal and come back to herself, you know. There's a ritual called closing the bones, where we wrap the woman up at different points of her joints, her knees, her ankles, knees, her hips, her chest and her shoulders and her head. It's like you're wrapping the woman back together again after she's been opened and exposed and vulnerable in this birth process, and then coming back. Yeah,
because the old treatment for sciatica, there's a type of sciatica where it's caused by misalignment of the sacroiliac joint, because during birth, obviously the pelvis opens and closes, and if it closes in a slight misalignment, it can cause pain and sciatica. And the old treatment for it was get pregnant again.
Oh, wow.
Because the idea was that when you opened up, it might close in a better alignment. But as well as like the emotional and spiritual support of closing the bones, is that what it's called? I can also imagine that it's probably quite good for a woman to be in those moments, to be slightly held for a little while after the process too.
Totally. I think that's a huge, like, just being held is a huge theme. That could be a whole topic. I think, you know, in the society, Western world, women aren't held the same way in other cultures, where there's a lot more emphasis on postpartum, the 40 days in bed, and you know, not lifting heavy things. Like so I do Arvigo therapy, or it's also called Maya Abdominal Massage therapy, or Tulish it's an indigenous practice.
Where's it from, Aisling?
It's from the Mayan people. So so Belize, the man Don Ligio Panti is the kind of the man where this work comes from, and he was a Guatemalan kind of doctor, priest, shaman, healer who was based in Belize, and he we do all this work with women. There's a lot of it to do with plants and herbs as well, but a lot of hands-on body work. But like traditional Chinese medicine, there's a lot of similarities of, you know, keeping the body warm, the womb warm, not lifting heavy things, which sounds so obvious, but you know, women carry heavy things all the time, and we're not looking after our pelvis and our
I think that's one that people actually find a lot of women find that a real issue.
Yeah.
Like, I had to really stop Yvonne from doing it at all. Like, it was just really, especially after having the C-section, but it's just like, you're just like, nope, don't do it. And it's nearly like, it's so funny when people are like, no, this is what I do. I carry things.
Exactly,
And like, but not just for a few weeks, don't do it. And you're nearly like, your work is kind of, like, nobody minds picking up the slack. Yeah. But there's a real issue with people relinquishing what they're used to holding.
There's a really cool book, actually. It's an illustrated book of women carrying things, and just a picture of women carrying different things, like shopping, like, you know.
Baby on the hip.
It's like guilt and shame, like carrying everything. What do we carry? It's really interesting. But and even with C-sections, you know, they're so common. I did a C-section as well. But it's a huge, like, you're cutting through 7 layers. It's a huge surgery, and you should not be doing anything after that. But fortunately, you have a newborn to look after, and you have a car seat to carry, and it's actually near impossible to not carry anything in those 6 weeks.
It really is. And I'm a bit quiet listening to you, because I'm actually thinking I have so many things that this relates to, so many memories, but they're all quite tender. So I don't want to be too flippant, you know, like, about that. But I really think So I'm kind of thinking, what will I say and won't I say something about? Because I think the womb is such a tender part of a woman, and so I don't want to be talking about my lovely wife's, most tender things. But I do think, at a slightly more abstract level, what I have seen, like when you're at the coalface of things going wrong in Western hospitals and stuff. Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs doing, and in fairness, now we had the kids in the Netherlands, and like there's good Western healthcare, but yeah, there is something we haven't processed properly yet. You can see, like even when our daughter was born and she had to go to a different ward, and I was just like, no, but I have my wife to care for, and I have my daughter to care for, and they're both not well. What the fuck am I going to do? Like, I still cry about that regularly, because I was just like, I want to show up. I can't show up. Like, there's real, Then on the positive side, a good thing they do in the Netherlands is they send, what would you call that now in English? Thuishulp. So it's like a home nurse with you for the first 7 days or 10 days if you've had a C-section. And they will just be like, listen, I've 40 hours to give you.
Amazing.
So they're there the first morning, you come home and they help you kind of show you the ropes a little bit. Incredible. And they go, you guys go and sleep and I'll mind the baby, and they actually cook for you even, or whatever you kind of need, like what can sort of lift some of the burden. And I found that was a great help.
That's amazing. This is provided by the
that's just the normal state.
But when you think about it, that's the continuation of the human race, and it's the next generation of your country. Like, what I find it bizarre that care for mothers and newborns is sometimes almost considered a bit of an afterthought. Like, surely it should be an absolute priority, because like so much happens in those early days, both to mum and child, that if they get a little bit of, I was about to say extra support, if they get a little bit of the support they need, and would have had historically, I mean, everything gets easier. Like, I certainly see in my clinic, there's so many things that can tie back to birth trauma, like you said.
That's what I was going to say,
and lack of support. And even you touched on there, Bart, like birth trauma is not just on the mother, like
on everyone.
In everyone. And you're a witness. If you're in this helpless position where you're witnessing something happening and you're not in control of being the protector, that's traumatic. Yeah,
like for everyone. And like you, I was just going to mention birth trauma. Like I've mentioned before, I'm doing this course with Niall Graham and Michaela Ravlova on just on integrating masculinity and femininity. They're fucking great. It's very helpful. Does this microphone, do you want me to?
Tiny bit more gain, please, Bart. Okay. Thank you.
And, but it's like, wait a second. No, that's fine. But, like, and then if so we're doing that in a group, and if you're talking to the men in this group, like nearly everyone has experienced birth trauma, like as a child. And then obviously if that would be a group of women, then a lot of them would have not only experienced birth trauma, but also experienced the birth trauma of them giving birth, possibly. Like it's so deep. Like for my own birth, I was a huge baby. Would you're not surprised? You're not surprised.
26 pounds.
And just and it took I think it was way over like 42 weeks or whatever it was. Okay. Christmas Eve, Wow. So the story always goes that my mother was like, I ate too much, so it must be a bit unsettled, but it was me on the way. But then I had the umbilical cord around my neck, which apparently is very common as well. Common. I didn't know that as well. Like, so they're like, we have to get this guy out. And they actually, it sounds like a made up story, but they had to get in an Olympic rower who was a gynecologist to just forcefully get me out. So imagine what that was like for my mother and for me. Yeah. And then the joke was always like, I'm calling my dad and like, who does he look like? And he's like, well, he looks like E.T. So we always laughed about it, but now I'm a bit sad about it, actually. Yeah. I'm a bit like, I was so fucking battered from it. And then my poor mother was battered, and then like it being in an incubator for a long time, which is an enclosed space. She wasn't able to get it open. They took her away because they were like, you're getting hysterical. You know, it's quite traumatic, all that stuff. I don't want to go into it too deeply because it's also about other people's traumatic things, but it's like there's so much there. So I think what you're doing, it's so healing, you know. It's so powerful, it's so necessary, and there seems to be a real growth of consciousness recently, because I'd never really talked to women in my life about, like, we talked about periods. You can tell us what the nicer word or the better word is that we're going to use in the future, but we talked about that with girlfriends or with my wife or my sister, you know, but I never really knew about all the seasons of the month. And how impactful that is, and how helpful that is as a man living with a woman. And they, like, for instance, Niall says that men have like a day cycle.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like testosterone in the morning. Yeah, sun cycle, they call it. And women have the moon cycle. Yeah. And, but it's so helpful to know, oh, okay, it's that time of the month. And not in a patronizing or diminishing way, but more like, okay, you might need a bit more of this, or maybe you're feeling differently about certain things now than you might be in 2 days. Like, that's so helpful.
It's so helpful, yeah. I like to think about, like, the sun and moon cycle is really helpful. And I think this image of, like, you know, the switch for the light, you have like an on-off switch. Yeah. You also have a dimmer switch. I feel like men, kind of the hormones for them is like on, like testosterone in the morning, on, and then off at night. And for women, it's like, you know, there's a whole spectrum of what things can go up to full brightness and back down again, and goes around and around. But yeah, it's so, I think, you know, it's great that men are learning about this now and able to support the women in their lives. Yeah. But we're only like a step behind. We've only been learning about this very recently. Like I'm almost 40, but I only learned about this in my 30s, say maybe early 30s, maybe late 20s. But so many women are not learning about this at the beginning. That's why I want to try and change. But it's like, it's when you understand that your hormones are impacting how you think, feel, act, your hair, your skin, your appetite, your sleep. It's everything in your life day to day. Yeah. And if you, especially the negative thoughts in your head, the inner critic that comes out, if you didn't know that it's your hormones doing that, you're going to think that you're crazy, that something's wrong with you. If you understand that it's your hormones making you feel that way, it just gives you so much more self-acceptance and compassion. I think that's the biggest thing for me, and for why when I teach this work to women of all ages, that it's just inviting in a bit more of acceptance and compassion with ourselves. And then,
because that's an important, sorry to cut across you, but that's such an important part, is like the first step is observing it, right? Being like, oh, women are not like men that are broadly kind of chugging along in roughly the same speed all the time. You know, women have cycles of depleting and regenerating. They have cycles of productivity and rest, you know. And because we live in a society which is, you know, a capitalist, productive based society.
9 to 5, 2 days off.
Exactly. You know, the female cycle maybe doesn't slot in so nicely with that. And there can be a little bit of, well, basically it's nice to give people, like, make them aware of it, but then help them understand the beauty of it, the strength of it, the reason, like, it is a feature, not a bug. It is like, it is power. And, you know, to get very highfalutin, I think it's really what the world needs right now, rather than constant growth, like, you know, growth and then rest and times when we're more productive and more fallow and so on. So it's lovely that you're out there providing, and in a very gentle, warm, loving way.
Not in a judgmental way or because that's the reason I've been doing the course I'm doing is because it's about integration of those two parts. Like I think there's been a lot, because when people are wounded in an area, they can be triggered from that area, and it can be like, okay, we want to help women, not men, or something like that. Or it can get, and I've never, with you, I've always felt, no, this is a very positive movement. This is not about rejecting anything. And we're all learning about this stuff. Like even I think with the men being more of an on-off switch, I think that probably is more nuanced as well, but we're all learning about this stuff, you know. And it's exciting. Like, it's an exciting journey to be on. I heard a friend of mine was saying, geez, I would have loved to be an explorer a couple of 100 years ago, but now all the lands have been are known. And I'm like, no, man.
No.
There's fucking dimensions and
there's
so much.
Absolutely.
There's so much to discover.
Even just learning this land. Sorry, a bit of a tangent, but just like we've all...
Even like Síle na gigs. I love Síle na gigs. And I feel like there's 111, 116 found in Ireland, but that's not all of them. I bet there's still more that haven't been discovered yet.
Can you talk to that a bit? Because we know what you're talking about. But
I'd love... one of my life goals is to find a Síle na gig. That would be great.
Oh my God.
But Síle na gigs are... they're like... I don't know, archetypal, or they're in a stone carving of kind of grotesque female figure with exaggerated vulva, and her hands are kind of down opening the vulva. That's what it's. And the really weird thing about them is that they're found over like church doorways around Ireland, often. So you think, why is there this big grotesque sexual figure found on these Christian places? And they weren't always there. They were somewhere else before. They were moved and put there. Okay. So that's another part of the enigma. Like, what were they doing before? And there's lots of different thoughts around it. There's books that you can read about it. There's a lovely map you can buy with all of them around Ireland. You can go searching. I have it in my car for whenever you have the time. Yeah, I'm always like different county, different Síle. But yeah, like there's, were they there to ward off against sexuality in the church, or were they some sort of symbol of fertility and feminine power, which I think they were?
Yeah.
Well, we have such a strong tradition of strong women in Celtic legends.
So I think before this whole patriarchy and the church, what that did to kind of erase women in certain powerful roles. This kind of gives the hint that actually women were that powerful. And I think, coming from 10 years in New Zealand, where I was kind of steeped in the spirituality of the Maori people and their culture, and they had the same kind of feminine power was huge, and they used to have kind of symbols of same thing with women with their legs open, and men would walk underneath this doorway to be blessed by the and even like they dipped their swords in menstrual blood before they went into battle, and women would run ahead of the battle, naked towards the opponent. Like it just it's really interesting to see the similarities.
So interesting, and I think like I think I'm pretty sure, even not knowing that much about it, but I just have this strong sense that they were just already old pagan archetypes that have just been adopted by the church. Like that's kind of the bad and the good of the church, I suppose, is that they really cynically adopted loads of stuff to make it go over with the natives, kind of, or that's the way I think. But the good thing is that they're still kept within the tradition to a certain. I know. No,
I agree. I think these archetypes are so strong and so primal that you can't erase them. So I think the church is like, okay, we're going to take them, we're going to co-opt them.
They're saints now. They're not goddesses, they're saints.
Yeah, but then they never fully take them over. They have too much power. Like Saint Bridget as well.
Yeah.
There we go. So like, who's a Catholic saint of so and so and stuff, and she wasn't a saint. She was a Celtic goddess. She was one of the Tuatha De Danann, and all that stuff about poetry and the hearth and blacksmithing and medicine comes from her role as an Irish pagan goddess, which then got integrated into sainthood, Catholic Christian sainthood.
Exactly. And I love what you were saying about dipping the sword. And I was learning on a call last night about like the kings of Ireland actually marrying the land, and that they were by priestesses were like kind of vetted, like, are you a good responsible man? Then you can marry this land, and that doesn't mean that you are a dictator. That means you are going to hold its boundaries, you're going to mind the land, and you're going to mind its people. So it's not, in that sense, that should not have been a patriarchal thing. That should have been a real interplay. And then another thing I love, so we moved to Kilnaboy a year ago, and I was looking up the name. Well, Kill is obviously church. But that Naboy part is a bit hard. It has something to do with the daughter of a goddess or whatever. But it was actually all, the names were so hyper Oscuelga that I couldn't. I won't try to pronounce them. But what I loved was that it was all in reference of the old church in Kilnaboy being a place of fertility for women.
And that's where the best Síle na gig in Ireland is.
Exactly. So no coincidence there.
No coincidence, yeah.
So I love that we live in a tiny village which is known for its fertility, and that it's named after that.
That's amazing. I go there a lot to that church, and if I'm ever there, I bring anyone who comes to visit me. from near or far. That's where we go there, and then then to the Burn, the Holywell, and Harry's. Of course.
Is that where you recorded the video with?
The documentary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Black Bart Films.
Yeah. So we had a few different.
So next time you bring me along and you can tell me all about all of the stuff, because I'd love to know.
Well, the thing is, often when I'm there visiting Síle, there'll be some other tourists will come by to look at the church.
Yeah.
And I always feel compelled. I'm like, sorry, now, excuse me, I'm going to have to do this. Don't mind me. Hello, do you know if this is a Síle?
I feel compelled.
I have to tell someone I'm with, excuse me, I'm about to go and share something now. And then I tell them where the sheet I pointed up, because they don't even know that it's there. And then I tell them what it is and what it represents, and
it's kind of brilliant that they don't see it's there either. Like, it's kind of it's kind of a hidden. It's like what Jane Cargill said about the Burn. It's like it rewards being observant.
Oh, I like that.
It's not like, go into fucking Kerry with your big mountain. No, I'm joking, Anthony. Beautiful there.
I was there earlier this week. I have the sadness of any Kerry man who's not in Kerry.
Obviously gorgeous, but like in the Burren, kind of a bit more hidden. Yeah. And I love that like, especially I'd say with some of the Americans, they might be like, if they saw, they're like, oh my God, it can be quite puritanical.
Christianity, real different over here.
Yeah, exactly. But I love that that's there, and I love that it's there in the church, and it's nearly like the salve is in the wound, kind of, in a way.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
There was so much wounding in the church, but then that's there as well.
That's still there, yeah.
Well, the idea of archetypes is that they're in the collective unconscious. They're not signs. Exactly. Signs are created by people, like the Amazon logo or whatever. That will eventually disappear. But archetypes like the Síle gig will always come back because they come from a deeper place.
I love that. And you can feel it on the land too. So there's a lot happening with Irish women as a collective too, with their reclaiming their power, and so it's an interesting time, definitely.
One thing I've noticed in the clinic, which I absolutely love,
Your clinic, this is...
My clinic, yes. Is that a lot of younger women, let's say under the age of 35, they're using, for a bunch of reasons, but they're not using so much birth control, and they're tracking their basal body temperature, and they're tracking their fertility cycle through apps and infrared thermometers. And I just think that is one of the most beautiful applications of technology, where it actually serves to connect you with your body and with an integral part of your cycle and stuff. And also gets you off a daily pharmaceutical. And there's no judgment here at all about anyone that chooses to take birth control. If it's the right choice for you, it's the right choice for you. But it had become so ubiquitous, which I find... Because if you are talking about how hormones are an integral part of your identity and your feelings and your emotions, then, I mean, what would you think about daily taking a medication to regulate, quote unquote, them, and how do you feel about people?
Yeah, it's interesting. The pill is so interesting because it used to be illegal in Ireland to go on the pill.
That's right.
And the pill back then, say 50s, 60s, 70s, represented controlling how many children you have, and that is a positive thing for many women when they didn't want to have 11, 12, 13. And then I know stories about women used to drive over the border to the north to get the pill. It's like this kind of like illegal,
and condoms as well. Wasn't it? Yeah.
So I think it became like being on the pill then in the 70s, 80s became this kind of stance of like female empowerment. We're taking back our own power.
Liberation.
Liberation. And that's a really positive thing. And then that kind of stuck there for a while and became a very common, like you just 17, 18, go on the pill, stay on the pill for 10 years. Younger, or if you have bad periods, have acne, doctor will say go on the pill. Then, of course, this menstrual revolution's been happening the last maybe 5-10 years especially. Well, say 10 years. And we're realising that, okay, the pill actually stops you ovulating. But that means if you don't ovulate, you don't get progesterone in the high amounts that you get those 2 weeks after your ovulation. Progesterone has short-term and long-term health benefits, bone health, cardiovascular health, mood. Like, it's a mood regulator. If you're having healthy progesterone levels, you're going to be sleeping better and feeling more grounded and calm. And, many of us, myself included, realise, hang on a second, this is not supporting us on our health. So, we took decision to go off the pill. So then going off the pill and not going on the pill and learning about, tuning into your cervical position, your cervical fluid, your basal body temperature. This is now the new liberation empowerment. So it's just interesting to watch it all go. And like everyone's different, and there's definitely a time and a place where the pill is serving a good purpose. Absolutely. But perhaps for taking a decade of your life on this thing that's going to be changing the way you smell, scent. Like, you know, there's stories about who you're attracted to, like
I've
the pheromones
that
you feel, that you pick up on someone when you're on the pill versus when you're off the pill is different. That's so interesting. So yeah, it's just
I'm going to put something mad out here. I've got a book on that shelf behind you called The Huainanzi, which is it might be almost my favorite book. It's 2,500 years old, and it was about the king of Huainan wanted to put together a text on how to run a country. And he's going to present it to the prince, and it encapsulates philosophy and political structures and agriculture and astrology and medicine, and everything's in there. It's like, we're just going to tell you how to run a country. But it keeps using this principles of, if X is happening, the country is well governed. If Y is happening, then it's going a bit wonky. If Z is happening, then it's really out of whack, right? And there's this thing in all Chinese literature of it's like things were better back then. They look backwards. They were like, in olden times, people really understood it. Whereas like, I think in the West, we're like, oh, we're constantly developing. Now is the best time that there's ever been, and it's only going to get better tomorrow. But they're like, no, the guys 100 years ago were good, but the guys 1,000 years ago really knew their stuff, you know? But they have this fascinating sentence, and it's like, if things are really out of whack, if the leader has really failed the country, if things are really, really, really bad, there's certain signs, and one of them is that eggs will not be fertilized. And I read that, and I was like, what a strange sentence. Like, as a mark of a health or an unhealthy society, eggs will not be fertilized. And it doesn't really go into it. But it just got me thinking about how nowadays in the society we're living in the Western developed world, so many women are on birth control. And I'm just curious as to how much of that is due to the fact that women like don't want children or don't feel like it's a safe environment to bring children into the world. You know, do they feel financially insecure? Do they feel insecure with their partner? Do they feel insecure with, you know, their health, with the state of the world, with politics, with environmentalism? Because at the end of the day, you know, if you walk down the street of a major city, a lot of the women of childbearing age are pharmaceutically incapable of having children, you know, and that's absolutely their choice. I think these options should be available to everyone. There's no judgment here whatsoever. But I think as a mark of a society, I find that very interesting, how widespread it is.
And I think, it also ties into, I thought you said beautifully there, Aisling, the different meanings that a thing can have, you know, like, I don't know how I'm connecting that to what you're saying, Anthony, but I feel it's connected. It's like, it has something to do with that idea of like, not having kids equals freedom. But then one of my best friends in the Netherlands was like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom to my 3 kids for at least the first 10 years. And she had to defend that at every corner. Yeah. Which is insane to me, because freedom should not mean, freedom should be freedom. Freedom should not be forcefully, like sort of, what's the word, like pushing against what was, you know. It's like, no, you're free. It's like that thing when we talk about the moon cycle and the sun cycle. I think those things, we can say those things are true for men and for women without putting any, you know, like, if you want to do very masculine things as a woman or very feminine things as a man, like, have at it. I love you. Go do the, you know, whatever you want. But it's funny that it can be such... I think there's a real issue with that againstness. You know, instead of... Like, that's why I said I love what the work you're doing, is because you're moving into something. It's not necessarily just pushing away against something. And this sentence didn't really work out well. But
it's okay. Aisling's going to save us both.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
Yeah, let's turn to her now. I hope everyone's on YouTube to see that little choreograph we did, move we did there.
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, it touched on some big topics, I guess, because, you know, even like what I'm hearing there is the topic even of infertility as something that's prevalent. And obviously, we're mentioning the woman in the womb and the eggs, but sperm count is the other half of that. And that's another issue. Like, there is probably too big to go into this discussion. I'm not qualified to speak on it at length, but like infertility, unfortunately, the rates are getting higher and higher.
But like it's staggering with men. It's like 80 to 90% reduction in sperm motility since the early 80s. Like it is terrifying.
Yeah. And I've heard it's due to plastics. I've heard it's due to pharmaceuticals.
And WHO just keeps like lowering the threshold for normal sperm. Just every 5 years they just drop it lower.
Oh no, they love doing a bit of that.
90% normal morphology. Now I think it's like 6%. They just keep dropping it. Like so.
Yeah, it's true. And there's obviously cultural things going on that you said there, and there's lots of environmental stuff, and we're just living in this world there's a lot wrong in this world, and we're feeling the benefit, the effects of that in all kinds of ways, including on infertility. And I guess, in my clinic space, all different reasons people come to me, but there's kind of the same themes that always come up, and like infertility is one, and it's a heart-achingly, really, really tragic thing for a couple to go through. It's a very long, arduous journey, and there's no sure hope at the end of it. It's just long time. And the other things, are birth trauma, and then unfortunately sexual trauma is so I did not know it was this common until I got into this work, and unfortunately it's so common that there are women that are something that happened to them years ago, like, or they're still dealing with in their bodies because they have that. So it's just, I don't know. Now I'm going on different topics, but there's a lot of different heavy themes when you come to womb work and supporting women in this way.
So a friend of mine was speaking about the fact that even some minor things that had happened to her had been really stored in her womb. Is that something you find a lot? That it's a place of great holding on to? Your body, your issues.
Your body remembers things. There's definitely that, and it'll be, women will come, just keeping everything obviously respecting women's privacy, but clients come to me with different reasons. That could be a physical thing, a symptom that's happening with their menstrual cycle, but then when they get on the table and we do the work, something else will come up, some emotional thing that happened a long time ago, or some memory of something that happened, and that's very, very, very common. And it's just about, I guess, being often with trauma, it's something that wasn't processed at the time. So with birth or with a sexual thing that happened, they didn't have the support, the space, the holding when it happened to process it and release it. So then 10 years later, they're postpartum, they've had a baby, they want to come for a session, and then something like that will resurface again. And then it's just about, being with them and letting them release it there and then.
I mean, the release is such an interesting word, because, the menstrual cycle itself involves a shedding. There is a clearing out and a regrowth. I know clear out is the nicest word, but like there is that release, and definitely in Chinese medicine, we think that women are very lucky to have menstrual cycles, because every aspect of the menstrual cycle is controlled by a different aspect of the body. So for example, if it's early, it means one thing. If it's late, it means one thing. If you're light, if you're heavy, if you're normal, clotty, not clotty, colour, odour, discharge, pain before that stops when the bleed starts, pain before that continues into the bleed. They all mean different things, And there is no separation between the mind and body in Chinese medicine. So you will often find a pathology that we call blood stagnation. Blood is any physical substance. Blood, if you think of qi as anything in the body that's non-physical, so that could be the nerves or the thoughts or the emotions, that's all qi. And then anything physical, the bones, the skin, the muscles.
Different forms of flow. We call it hemodynamics.
But a lot of the time what I find is that women with quite deep trauma, and it can be sexual trauma, birth trauma, obviously if it's in that area, it's going to be encoded in that area more strongly. But almost any kind of trauma, if it's held and not released, it will start manifesting commonly, not always, but commonly, as what we would call blood stasis. And then there is like either an inability to release, so either light menstruation, or there can be lots of clots and lots of pain and stuff like that. And the ability to process through releasing, because that's what you actually need to do before you can replenish. You actually need to release. Does that match with what?
Definitely, and I think as well, like something I always say is like, so a menstruation is a physical shedding, but it's also an emotional release of everything that you carried that month. So it's very common. I tell clients if they come to see me for a session, it's quite a deep, powerful session. Like your next period might be a big one. Absolutely. Like either as in like a lot of cramps, or really exhausted, or maybe really red fresh blood, or maybe a lot of stagnation, like old brown blood coming out, or maybe a longer, all the things. And totally. I don't read research on these things, but I just know from my practice and my own experiences that there's definitely a connection between your emotional landscape and then that release that happens every month for you as well.
And the one thing I find really interesting is, and some of my colleagues might disagree with me, but if I'm treating a woman for gynecological stuff, or even something that just has a gynecological aspect where it's manifesting through the period, if it changes for 1 month, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that, because the cycle has a regulatory effect on the body. Like you said, somebody might go from having a light cycle to like one really heavy, really clotty cycle. Yeah. And I'm not there panicking going, oh, this woman is now bleeding too much and has developed clots. I'm like, no, the body is self-regulating.
Exactly.
Now, if that continues for 3 or 4 cycles, then you look at it. But so often you have one abnormal, quote unquote, cycle that is actually having a huge regulatory effect on the body.
The body knows what it's doing. Yeah, exactly. It's like what they call the 5th vital sign or 6th vital sign. The period is like showing your health and showing what's going on in your body, definitely. I've lost what I was going to say there, but I'll come back to that. Yeah, so important.
And so a big part of what you do, Aisling, which is so important, is kind of the education part, bringing young girls into the fold in a beautiful way, with a lot of holding. Then I know you do the massages. What else do you use in terms of methods? I know you do the steaming. Well, I'm just trying to give people a bit of like, I want to, get everyone on board with this. Because, but honestly, I mean it. Like, I think this is where it's at. Yeah. Men's work, women's work. I think I said it in the wrong order, but that was just to add to it. But I mean, like, I really think this is where it's at. Yeah. And I really think that this is what we need to... There's a lovely Dutch word, which is herinneren, which means to remember, but it is also, her is re, and so you could say it's remember, but it's also like inneren means to take something inside of you. So it's like, I've seen people kind of put a little hyphen in between the beginning and the second part of the word to go, no, we're not just remembering this, we are reintroducing it into our body, we're reintegrating it. Yeah. And so I'm really trying to sell everyone on the Aisling Browne method. So is there so there's the educational part, which obviously it might even be the most important because it's kind of preventative. I feel I'm very passionate about sharing the education. So I used to teach workshops in New Zealand for a while before I came back to Ireland, and I've been very busy the last few weeks trying to like place myself to do this work in Irish schools. So I do the mother-daughter workshops, which you're aware of. Yeah, so I take moms and girls together for a lovely afternoon, and we do lots of introducing menarche or periods. We talk about as well, like, girls coming into the stage of life, and then often the mothers who are in the group are at the other side of it, going out, leaving their menstruating years, which is interesting. But in schools, I think it's so important. I think there's such a gap at the moment in primary schools, especially. And touching back on what we said about, girls are having their periods or getting the first period at a much earlier age than they used to, and there's lots of reasons around that. Is it about phytoestrogens? Is there some amber fragrance that's in everything that they're absorbing? But I feel like primary schools in Ireland not all the schools have bins in the toilets, or like the 4th and 5th class toilets don't have any pads because and then they wait until a girl in that class gets her period and hasn't got any pad. And then they have to go and get, it's just, I feel like we're not... So it's more awkward for her even still.
Exactly.
Yeah. And awful to be that girl, I imagine.
Yeah. And I've been that teacher where trying to look around the school, trying to find pads for the student. It's not, like, I'm like, why do we not have free period products in all primary schools? Why is that not happening?
Well, it's almost like periods don't exist until they become a problem.
Yeah. So I would like periods to be visible in all schools. I want to have like those period products on the shelf in each toilet. And it doesn't matter if, all girls, 3rd, 4th class, 5th class should know what they are and have them there visible. And if they're visible in the school, it sends a signal out, a message that this is normal. It's just period. It's fine. It doesn't hide about it or be, that's my soapbox TED talk. But I just think there's a lot we could be doing around education. And I think introducing girls like to the language of your menstrual cycle, the seasons. Your inner winter is when you're bleeding, it's time to hibernate and rest up. Your ovulation is when your estrogen has peak, so you've got more confidence and more energy and you're better communicating and socializing and your skin looks better. Like you can use that power, you know, so, and giving girls that language of like, you know, I'm in my inner summer, I'm in my inner autumn. That is life-changing. If knowing that when you're 12, 13, that's going to change all your teenage years. That would have been life-changing for my teenage years, and then into your adulthood as well.
And it reframes the whole thing. Language is so important.
Yes.
If you don't have language for something, you can't identify with, you can't engage with it. I just remember when I was in secondary school, and obviously I was not in the inner circle of any of these things, but the only time I heard periods discussed was in a negative way. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, I've got my period now, you know, and you're like...
Yeah, or I've forgotten to bring something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what a terrible affliction to have, you know, and... How lovely that you're working. I love that you're working in schools, in institutions,
hopefully very
with
soon,
groups,
lots of schools,
and with the mothers and daughters.
After this goes out, all the schools.
It's all going to change.
I've been calling around with posters this week to the schools, and so we'll see what happens.
So but I do think the consciousness around it is growing. And just quickly to remark on what you were saying there about I'm in my inner winter, my inner spring. Like even as a man who doesn't have that lunar cycle, just being aware of the seasons of the year is like we're all in cycles of different lengths, you know. And I really like, we've spoken on the podcast about this, like that Chinese medicine idea, or not just Chinese idea, probably, or fucking doesn't matter where it comes from, idea of the winter being the time where things are budding underground, and autumn is actually the time of the death. And what a beautiful death, first of all. It's so beautiful. And it's the harvest as well. But I've really felt a lot of ideas and ego bits dying this year in me, in autumn. And then instead of going, oh, why is this all so fucking hard? I go, yeah, it's odd. I remember you fucking cool boy, saying to me, like, sometime, I was just like, oh, there's so much happening. We're creating so much stuff. And you're like, it's the springtime, brother. I was like, oh, he's such an arsehole, but he's right. You're not an arsehole, but it was just like you sounded so complacent with it, which is why it made me laugh. But I love you. But so that education, like, obviously so important. And then I want to talk also about the other things you do, because can we just quickly name them? So just for my male overview, you know, just so we have the education part. We have is it Avigo massage?
Yeah, it's got different names, but it's Maya Abdominal Massage Therapy. Yeah.
And what is Maya?
Maya comes from the Mayan people. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where it comes from. Yeah. So just giving, and always like, I'm always so careful as a, Irish woman to really respect the culture of the practice where it comes from. Yeah, the lineage. So that's got a few different components too. So one is body work, which is massage. So it's abdominal massage. So it's upper abdomen working on digestion, lower abdomen working around the uterus and pelvic bowl. But then alongside that, there's a few other pieces. One is, it's called spiritual healing. It's using water and plants and prayer to help. That's what usually I would use when emotions come up and there's some trauma to be released. We'll do a ritual and a kind of a practice releasing that. And it sounds so simple, and it is simple and gentle, but it can be a very potent and powerful way just to be held when a woman's going through something. There's also, it's called vaginal steaming, yoni steaming, pelvic steaming, which is species, like it's been across different cultures, like probably in Asian, like Eastern tradition too.
I've never come across it, but the Asia's so big that I'm sure it's practiced there.
Yeah, I think it has been in some parts, and different South American cultures. Like we don't have evidence written down that it happened in Ireland, but I like to think that it might have. And
we definitely had sweat lodges.
Well, Harry showed me some remains of a sauna in the burn near the well, and I thought, okay, this could be where it happened.
And they did burn herbs. It wasn't just heat.
Exactly. So it's just medicine from the ground. So it's medicinal properties and compounds of plants with the property of steam. So like when you sit over a little stool or a little bowl of hot water, you can get nice little cute stools. I got beautiful stools made from a man in East Clare that are beautiful, like ash wood. Wow. But you can sit over them and you block the heat, so the steam is rising up towards the pelvic bowl and entering the uterine tissues, and like steam has a very healing effect, even a toning effect for the pelvic floor muscles, support for the cervix. The cervix lifts up when steam reaches it. So that's another another, I guess, tool that women can have and use. What else is there? We use castor oil a lot, castor oil packs. So that's just, the properties in castor oil are great at breaking down and decongesting. So we can use that as well to help with things like cysts or fibroids or that kind of thing.
Because I've heard from people, and like you say, we always want to keep this stuff private, obviously, but I've heard from people doing this stuff with you that it's really been very helpful. And I think I've heard this especially about the steaming, that it's like, or the way it was told to me, it sounds like a gentleness.
Yeah.
That it's like an area that probably has known maybe even violence or definitely repression and pain, to bring a lot of soft warmth to it.
It feels like a hug. It's like giving your womb a hug. Yeah, it's really supportive and gentle. And I love to. It's lovely to do as a practice on your own, or I do it with clients one-on-one. I've done it in the past, like in circles. So about 7 of us in a circle doing it together. It's so special. Yeah, really beautiful practice. And it kind of, when we're all sitting in a circle on our stools doing this and doing meditation during it, it's like we were like, this is what probably happened. Like women would do these kind of things in circle before, back to women's circles and women's work. Yeah, so.
Well, that's something
really
I was
special.
thinking of your role within education with young women and the workshop facilitator, is that there's almost the role of the initiator there as well.
Yeah, maybe.
And there's a quote in the book I'm reading at the moment, which is basically, it's talking about men, but it's like, if you want to learn to be if you're trying to learn to be a man from people the same age as you, they don't have a clue. You need a hierarchy. You need the elders of the tribe to you need to spend time with them. And your parents are not always the most appropriate people, for that job, so.
No, because they have taught you the way you already are.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So they're going to give you more of what you already have, in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, 11, 12-year-old girls don't want to listen to what their moms say.
Yes, of course.
Like a lot of mothers come to me, they want to come to the workshop because, like, they obviously choose to bring their daughters to the workshop. Daughters kind of come a bit, like, reluctantly at the beginning, but then they enjoy the day. But the mothers like that there's someone else there to help as an extra voice or another support, instead of just being the mother teaching them as well.
And I can imagine it kind of is a bit cool after a while as well, that it's like, oh, I'm part of this.
Yeah.
I'm part of, well, cool is probably not the right word, but there's something into being taken into the sisterhood or something.
I think if, especially a lot of girls that come to the workshops are like age 8, 9, 10, so they haven't got their first period yet. And I think when they learn about it, they're just so enthusiastic and excited about getting their, we get to have more chocolate because chocolate helps their cramp. Yeah. But then I think, girls 13, 14, 15 who've been introduced to the period, and it's not fun. Like, it's a very high anxious time for a girl at school, not knowing if she's going to start bleeding and leaking through her clothes at any moment. Like, how scary is that every day at school? Yeah. That's what the reality is. And then they have cramps, and then it affects their, plans to go swimming or play sports. So it can be, like, I'm not trying to make it all rose tinted. Like, it can be quite a negative experience as a teenager. So I think, getting in early with the girls before is really important. And then I suppose doing some sort of damage control, or like supporting the girls who are going through the hard time during those teenage years and giving them, holding them.
But I think, like, we can all see that there is difficult and good parts to anything, but just approaching it gently and positively. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking of, like, a friend of mine went through giving birth without experiencing pain, and it's not like some fucking competition that she won or something. It's like, but she was able to, and also that's partly luck, but she was able to relax into it in a way and kind of get into a certain state where it wasn't so painful. Whereas everyone is always saying, oh, it's so painful, it's so painful, it's so painful. Like, I think it will always be painful to some degree. And I can't speak to that, but I can imagine it being very, very painful. I have seen it, I have witnessed it twice. But everyone shouting how painful something is might not be helping.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that's similar. Now, maybe people are rolling their eyes listening to this man talking about this, but that's from what I see in it. Like, it seems to make sense to me. Like, I love that idea of you having, like, excited young girls going, oh, that's a thing I'm going to be able to do. Like, that moves me. Like, instead of going, that's, like you said, Anthony, that's a fucking shit thing you're going to have to deal with.
I think it is in a way, and this is a funny word, but it is a bit of a trauma, right? Look, it involves blood, it involves pain, it involves, you know.
Yeah, I'm not negating any of that, no.
But I just remember one of my favorite series of books, there's a race of people within it, and they say that women come of age, the blood brings you of age, basically, and women have their own blood. They bleed naturally, whereas men have to go out and kill something.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at indigenous cultures, often the young boys are brought out into the wilderness and they might have to fast, or they might have to kill an animal, or they will have to go through some kind of, or of course there's, you know, maybe body modifications and stuff like that they might be put through. But the idea that like men have to seek this kind of challenge outside themselves in the environment in order to overcome that and feel like a man. Whereas for a woman, it comes from inside. And I'd imagine it does change everything, like once you've been through it. And I think that's why guides and elders doing the kind of work you're doing, Aisling, are probably so important. Yeah,
I think like you're both saying there, it's about just acknowledging that it's not just all awful, painful, horrible, negative. It's like it's not shameful. It's a sacred thing. It's not painful. It's actually it can be painful, but it's also powerful. So it's just even introducing young people menstruating into these concepts, like it's not just all negative and painful. It actually is a beautiful, powerful thing. And like coming back now, I wanted to mention on my notes, but coming back around to like indigenous cultures, how they perceived menstruation in a very different way. So in New Zealand, the Maori people would have like rituals and rites of passage for these girls, and the father would like, you know, celebrate her when she got her first period. Even like the word for period like is waifero, like red river, like, you know, it's a lovely, there's a story about a girl getting her period in while she was bathing in the river, so her father named the river after her, like this kind of beautiful way. And then in Ireland, what I really love, and I always make sure to tell in every workshop I do, to share that the ancient Irish word for period, blood, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, if you've read Manchol McGann's book, it's blah squila. So blah is like petals or flower, bloom, and squila is like releasing or shedding. So it's like petals shed. That is such a beautiful word, because if that's what and this is my whole, you know, linguistics, language, world hypothesis, like the words we use have an impact. So if our ancestors used to refer to menstrual blood as flowers shedding their petals, that means there was no shame or taboo or grossness about period. It was a natural, beautiful thing.
I think it's so true, because period means nothing.
Yeah.
You know, there's no inherent meaning to that.
There's a Greek word, I was looking it up, it's some Greek word, But
like, it's, you know, in common parlance, it's just like period just sounds like, oh, there's one part of your cycle where something happens.
That is the period.
And don't worry about the rest of it. You know, it's
it takes away the cyclical nature of it, actually.
It does take away the cyclical nature. It devalues it.
But then again, it's also the starting point. It's like because, you know, your first day of your period is your day one. And you start counting again for your day 27, 31. You know, we don't all have, like you said before, we don't all have 28-day cycles that are the same every month. We change, and we can have heavier periods and all that. But yeah, it's like it's a marking point maybe. And I guess it's the evidence of the outside world that we can see. So our cervix is like this gateway between our inner world and outer world. So whatever happens, you know, in the womb, the growing baby, we can't see unless we go for a scan or whatever. But we can't see what's happening in our inner world until the period comes out. You can see red blood in our underwear. That's an evident sign of what's happening inside us. So maybe,
Sure. Yeah.
I love that about the shedding of the
petal. I know.
I was thinking it's petal time. Maybe that's a bit too.
Moon time is like my moon time is a nice way of saying it.
We're gonna have to nail it down at the end of this episode, which we're gonna call. But I do believe that it is important. Like what we call things. And while you were talking about that, just before you said that about the petal time, I was actually thinking. I don't remember who said it to me, but it was a friend. I don't know if it was here or in the Netherlands, who said she got a rose from her father when she got her first period.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
I thought
I love that.
So that's perfectly in line. And I think that's gorgeous because someone is doing something synchronous in a way. Like it's like someone has felt into it that is the appropriate... I remember who it was, good friend of mine. She, like her dad did, and whose dad is actually not a hyper-emotional man, but he must have felt that.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful.
That is so lovely. It's nice to be gifted something,
The Chinese for menstruation, I just had to double check that it was the same 08, but it's Yu-Jing, and it means blood from the moon.
Okay, yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool. Yeah. Like that's cosmic as well. Yeah. Like I think the petals shedding feels a bit more personal.
It's poetic. It's
but
so,
I think
so
that
Irish,
from the moon is like you're channeling all that energy. Yeah.
Well, it's actually really interesting. That jing, it can be menstruation, but it can also be channel, path, same jing law that we use for the acupuncture meridians and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. Flow. But UA is right there. Moon is the first card.
Moon. Lovely.
And of course we have moon, but people have moon cups and things.
Yeah, moon cups, menstrual cups. Yeah. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. We're covering lots, aren't we? How are we going?
We are.
Oh, flying it.
Well, hormones is something I wanted to talk to you about because I have a soft ban on the word hormones in the clinic. Okay. Not the way you use it, but the way like sometimes I get women going, my hormones are out of whack, and I'm like, what does that mean? You know, I'm absolutely here for it, but like, what does that mean? Water, Bart?
Sorry, buddy. I thought I was being helpful. Now I'm breaking your
But yes, thank you.
Editing.
You know, for example, I remember I had a patient once. Well, a lot of women will say, like, I get very irritable before my period. And then I'm so social when I'm ovulating. And there's this value judgment there where it's bad to be irritable and it's really positive to be social.
Yeah.
And you're like, maybe you're meant to be irritable.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think if there's a few days a month where you are hypersensitive to your environment, to your relationships, where you are like quite critical, and when you're having these strong emotional reactions. And what I have noticed in especially in women that are connected with their cycle is that if they're experience a bit of premenstrual tension, if their emotions are high, they often aren't very good at rationalizing or explaining like why this is happening. Like, that thing's driving me crazy. That's really upsetting me. They're often not very good at explaining why that is. But that emotion is often telling them something really, really deeply important. It's just not telling them through the logical brain. You can't sit down and because of X, then Y. And that's why I feel like this. It's just like, no, I can't not feel like this for a few days a month.
Yeah.
And it's so valuable. It's like just, I'm looking at the DAW here. It's just like removing the limiter and the compression. It's just like, there's no filter. It's just as it is.
It's gone. Like, so obviously estrogen is great for like, you know, it's very buoyant energy and it makes you see things in a great way, and it can be almost like you can tolerate a lot more. You can, and you're you know, it's great for parenting. You're more on the ball, and you can help your friends and nurturing other people. And then when you're on the other side of it, coming into your period, the hormones affect your body. That your tolerance is lower to everything. So BS detector is on. Like, you're just not really going to tolerate anything. And like, I think there's an extra challenge. You know, there's been studies done about menopause symptoms in other cultures, and it's not the same as the Western woman. So I think, especially coming into perimenopause, there's more stuff happening with our hormones, so the irritability can be more extreme, or the symptoms, how we can feel. But I think it's just about having like the tools to support yourself, you know, to, first of all, the awareness of what's going on. So I feel really irritable today, not myself, but look, I'm cycle day 22, so that could be a reason. That's number one. And then, okay, like, it'd be great just to feck off to the burn for the day and just scream into the abyss. But I had to pick up my child soon, and I have to go and do this job.
And I keep scaring Harry.
Yeah, Harry won't want that. So what can I do instead? So, like, you know, how does the modern woman, with all her things she has to hold and carry, how does she get through her dips and her... Yeah, so it's just about, I guess, learning, experiential learning of what supports you, and finding your tools and then having them, and like seeking out support in practitioners like ourselves, or having your, you know, council of wise women around you where you can be with, or like going off to, I think nature is a huge, like being held by Mother Earth when you're in those states. But yeah, I'm probably going off topic of what you were saying, but just that's kind of my perspective of the hormones and the shifts and how it happened. Like, yes, you can also go and get blood tests and find out your progesterone levels and your cortisol levels and your LH. But like, maybe in the reality, what you need today, what can you do today? It's going to make things a bit easier. And also, sometimes often for me, what I'm learning is it always comes back to the basics of like sleep, drink water, eat nourishing food, avoid sugar. Yeah. Avoid like it's just, and
maybe stay warm as well. That's something like you see Irish, like the teenage girls with their midriffs exposed and walking around in bare feet on their
bare
period.
Feet, sitting on a cold stone wall. Like there's all these things that same in the philosophy of Ayurvedic therapy, or like just keeping the womb warm, keeping the feet warm, keeping that the stagnation away by that. Yeah.
There's actually a pattern in Chinese herbal medicine called cold invading the uterus, which is kind of
oh wow, that's a good
cold
image.
Invasion,
Well, I think it's a thing with like people love the old sea swimming. I love the old sea swimming, but there was some like Ayurvedic doctors saying to my wife Yvonne, like, don't be doing that certain times of the month, and maybe not certain times of the year either. Just like, it's great, it's lovely, but your body is going to use so much energy to get back up warm, and for certain times of the month, that's not appropriate.
Well, it's also closing and opening. Like, that's the point of sea swimming. Is you go in and your body, from our perspective, sends yang to the surface in order to protect you against the cold. So it's very good at moving stagnation because it's like shifts all this, but it's also taking yang from your center to your surface. And if you might need your yang deeply internal in order to do the work of shedding and releasing.
100%. And then
I think, just in my own perspective on that, I think like getting into the water, so many benefits, and the endorphins you feel afterwards. And sometimes like if you are having a tough mental headspace, getting into the sea is just going to really shift all that.
Well, it's the shifting.
But I would say like if I'm making friends with the cold water swimming, I'm going to also like make the sauna my friend as well. So for me, I love the sauna is my like happy place. It's going in and sitting there because you can't think, you can't have your phone, you have to just sit and be. And I think if you're a woman who's wants to be careful about the cold water getting into your system, to kind of complement it with the sauna afterwards.
Yeah, and just really feel into yourself, I suppose, because I know that even with the sauna, the changes in temperature can still mean that you're taking energy somewhere else. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert, but I think with all of this stuff, it's just feeling.
Yeah, it's just being aware, tuning into your body and noticing what you're feeling, isn't it? It sounds simple, but actually.
And then another thing I wanted to say when you guys were talking about the hormonal stuff, I think it also, that shedding time, I think one of the reasons it is slightly suppressed societally is because it's not comfortable for society. Like it's, and I think there is an equivalent to it on the male side, but we'll get to that some other day, I think. But it's like, if you are just emotionally shedding and going, hey, listen, I don't want to deal with this shit anymore, people are going to have to fucking deal with that. So in a way, if I can put on my tinfoil hat, it's handier if you are a sort of controlling patriarchy to go put them all on the pill and keep all that stuff away. We don't want the angry women rising up when they're actually strongly feeling, and I've seen this in pregnant women as well, that there is a groundedness that is so powerful. And if you see a woman giving birth, it is
glorious.
Jesus Christ, there is a power there that is insane to behold, and a privilege to be with, and kind of try and create the best we can do as men in that space. I think it's just create space, hold space for that goddess that's there in that moment. But I really think there is something to that irritability. It's not nice. People don't like being, and especially I think women are like, no, I want to be nice, I want to be friendly, I want to be, like you say, I can be helpful to my friends. Yeah, that's all great. Everyone is accepting of that. But when you're like, that shit needs to go. If you are the person who is that shit, you know.
Well, I think, and this is the archetype during this phase of the cycle, the luteal phase, or the premenstrual phase. The archetype is the wild woman. Yeah. So that's the woman who doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't give a f and just.
Is that Kalyak as well?
It's like the witch.
Kalyak, yeah. Well, that almost comes. That's the wise woman that comes in the menstrual. So the wise woman is the menstrual phase, and that's inner winter, and also like if we think of Celtic points on the wheel, like that's Samhain. That's your, and then we have Imbolc is like follicular phase, and that could be Bridget, and that's the maiden energy, that kind of growing, curious, playful, and then just kind of keep going right around. Ovulation is inner summer, which is Bialtana as well, that kind of vibrancy, fertility, and the mother archetype, the one who can create and give birth, and then we come around to the pre-menstrual wild woman. And what was the other thing I was mentioning?
Luteal
phase. Kailuk, Banfasa.
Well, that's a wild woman. So
Yeah.
she's like the one who doesn't. She's wild and howling at the moon, and this, and if you like, there's an amazing book. I'm not sure if you've come across Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Okay.
Cool. And that book she writes. It's really good. Yeah, it's kind of Jungian. It's all different stories with archetypes. Around the feminine and the wild woman and reclaiming the wild woman. Mm-hmm. So I think, in our, I'm not going to go into politics today, but in our world, we actually need more wild women just to be wild and to stand up against stuff that's not right. And I have faith in the power of women and what's going to happen in the future. Like we're not going to be, I'm hopeful about the future of, restoring the patriarchy.
Well, you nailed it kind of, because it's like, another wild woman.
There's our wild woman home.
There's a wild woman. She can come and join us.
No, she's not. It's quite clear. It's great.
I think if we ask Katie to jump in on any pods anymore, she's going to start charging for guest appearances.
But you nailed it, because you said we're not going to talk about politics, but I have faith in these wild women.
Yeah, that's my stance on it.
That's 100% where I'm at. It's like don't wait for delivery from those old systems or whatever, but
I saw this.
Connect with the wild women, connect with the strong boundary holding men,
exactly.
The healthy, who are all integrated in all parts of themselves, the women and the men, and then working together from
and women who are using their voice. I think and I love seeing there's some amazing women in politics today in Ireland and other countries, like women who are just speaking the truth and they're not afraid to challenge things, and they're pressing against.
Oh God, we've such a tradition of that. Yeah, Bernadette Devlin, that. And like we've she's like a modern day Queen Maeve. But when we were talking about the shedding, Bart, and you were talking about how it's inconvenient for the people you're around, I was about to say that luteal phase, that premenstrual wild woman phase, I was like, that's probably a bit more outward focusing, But then I was like, actually, for a lot of women, all their phases are outward focusing, because when you're ovulating, you're taking care of people, right? It's still outward, for a lot of women. They're like, I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter,
Well, I think that part's like, it's actually more of the inward, downward spiral coming back in again. But then, like you're saying there, I think, I can't remember where I was introduced to this concept, but it made so much sense that actually, like, we're all about being in our feminine. I would see myself as quite someone who's really in her feminine, almost too much, very flowy, hooping on the beach, not getting my shit done. But actually, being a mother you have to be in your masculine to be like, you have to be, get the school on time, get the lunches packed, do this. You're having so much so much mental load that's actually quite a masculine. That's the right thing to say?
Yeah, I think you're dead right.
So interesting.
It is,
and beautiful to embrace all of that. I was really enjoying. So I've been working with Michaela from Rooted Feminine Wellness, and she had this wonderful thing where she was like, also very in her feminine in a beautiful way, but also just really honest about it. Like, she's like, sometimes I'm so in my feminine, I'm not getting any shit done.
Yeah. I relate to that, Michaela. Yes.
And it's like, but it's great when you can, when you can be.
And that's what we all need. Like and I don't want to be all polarizing, like masculine, feminine, male, female, men. But actually, we are a spectrum inside ourselves, and also we need to be surrounded by it. We need to be like, I love coming on a podcast talking to two men about periods. Like we have to. It's all about the union of these two energies together within ourselves and with each other.
But not pretending they don't exist. Like I always think you can have in you as a person can have whatever you want in terms of how much masculine or feminine or whatever, but recognizing that these are two very important yin yang, well, literally forces that are codependent, interdependent, but they exist. These energies exist. Let's not pretend they don't exist. I think there's I actually think that is another systemic disempowerment if we're going to pretend that they don't exist and everything is neutral. I don't think that's what it is. It should be free and open to your own preferences, but let's not pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, because one side of that is that gender is a complete, gender doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is polarity, where it's like, if you're really feminine, you need somebody who's really masculine, and vice versa, And I think both of those are nonsense. If we go back to the dimmer switch, I think when the dimmer switch is all the way down, it's off, and when it's all the way up, it's definitely on.
Yeah.
But you do have everything in between, and that's really messy. But it's really individualized. You know, it might be context dependent. Sometimes you feel more like a man in one context and less like one in another context.
And then there's the healthy and the wounded version. There's a healthy masculine, feminine, the wounded. So it's all about, I think, awareness of our own journeys and all that, in both, and then in relating, how we can, meet that as well.
And I think wounded is such a good word. Wounded is such a good word because people often talk about this stuff as if it's only ideas or something. But you can feel if someone is doing something from a wounded place. Yeah. And that doesn't mean they're completely incapable. But
and they might just be on their journey.
Yeah. But
it's
like...
PMSing as well.
Yeah.
So we give grace to that, don't we?
Yeah, no, but I mean,
That's true.
Yeah. It's true.
To see your own wounding as well. Like, to see your own wounding and know, like you said this very eloquently before, Anthony, where it's like when you know you're triggered and you're also going to have to take some responsibility for that. That's not just like, hey, you've done something wrong because I'm triggered. It's like, I'm triggered. Something from externally has hit something internally and now all this shit is happening.
Exactly.
You know, but...
that's where the growth happens too.
Yeah, that too.
Self-reflection.
It's in a way a bit of a gift. You're like, it's a bit like the wild woman phase. Yeah. You're like, this has really set me off.
But it's a real gift because that's the time to do all your journaling, all your, long podcast WhatsApp with your friends and process what's going on in your life. And then it's like you almost get clarity. There's this, there's different parts of the menstrual phase in that book, Wild Power. Amazing book, actually. Men should read that book too.
Yeah.
And they talk about like there's vision and there's clarity and direction. So you get this sense of like of a clarity and purpose, and you get your answers. So there's also a phrase, bleed on it. So before you make a decision.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
I like that.
Something's happening in it can be any topic, any area of life, but there's lots of, what's the word? Like uprooting or, stuff
maybe
happening.
Clearing stuff out.
Yeah, it's all coming up to the surface to be looked at when you're in your premenstrual, which is very uncomfortable, while you also try and do all the things and live day to day. But then if you have time to really process it all and drop into it and then have the stillness when you're menstruating, if you can have a bit of, even a couple of hours in bed or just a bit of time to yourself with cacao, journaling, you feel like you receive this clarity and this redirection. And then you have the next phase, which is renewal. So you come back out day 3, the renewal of like, here I am, new cycle. It's a lovely feel. So, as hard as the premenstrual phase can feel for all of us, and I've had some, tough months myself, it's like that renewal that you get at the end of your period is just beautiful. It's like your blank slate, here we go again, fresh start. And that's great.
And is there, you said cacao journaling, right?
Cacao, I just love cacao, yeah. Cacao.
I was going to say, like, I think we all know there is some kind of fucking magic with women in cacao, is there?
Well, Ireland is the highest consumer of ceremonial grade cacao in the world, which is very...
You're joking.
Oh, well done, Ireland, yeah.
But it's because we love it, like holding a nice warm cup of something. And we live in a cold country. Yeah. But yeah, cacao it's a beautiful, if it's drank, with respect, and you're taking a nice dose of ceremonial grade, it's a heart opener, it's a vasodilator,
I only had my first creative, proper cacao like 2 weeks ago.
Oh really?
Oh,
no
nice.
way.
My gosh, I get it.
You get it, it's lovely.
And
it's magnesium, it's great for your cramps, it's
And something that kind of tangentially has come up a few times is like the debt we owe to indigenous cultures, for me to East Asian medicine and you to South American medicine and stuff. And this is something I think a lot about, navigating these things and, transmitting them through, white people into an Irish culture and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I do think medicine crosses boundaries. Like any boundaries, national boundaries, any kind of boundary. I think medicine is one of the things. Art, medicine, there's probably others. Cooking, I would say, crosses these boundaries. And I think those things that can be worked with respect, very important to draw from them, to practice them as best you can, but also to do them authentically. And frankly, we have so little to offer women who are having difficulties with their cycle, even if it's just like, we've talked a lot about the emotions and stuff and the effect of that on the cycle. Some women are just crippled with pain. Like some women have these terrible premenstrual cramps. And I was giving I can't remember what it was. I was doing a PowerPoint. I can't remember if it was a lecture or presentation or something. And it was about a formula, w.Aisling, which is a very, very common formula for lots of things, but it's particularly good for women, particularly good for premenstrual cramps. And I was just like, one of the things you have to do in these things, and I'm going to say for the record, I fucking hate this, but you have to have a slide up at the top saying, biomedicine says, the Cochrane review of the medical literature, Western medicine defines premenstrural tension. And I'm like, I don't care about that. But what I was shocked to find was that Western medicine, biomedicine, defines premenstrual tension or premenstrual stress or whatever you want to call it as nothing in particular.
Oh God.
Something to do with hormones. It's shocking. I was like, I checked and double checked, and they were like, when you regulate, sometimes you work backwards from the treatments, right? Yeah. So they're like the recommended treatments for premenstrual tension are the pill, painkillers, or antidepressants. And I'm like, none of those are dealing with it. And then when I look from the Chinese medicine viewpoint, and I'm sure the indigenous viewpoints around the world, I'm like, okay, well, if this is happening, it's a chi issue. If this is happening, it's a blood issue. If this, it's liver related. If this, it's kidney. Like, there must be, I could probably name off the top of my head 30 different differential patterns of gynecological dysmenorrhea. Yeah. And, in Western medicine, they're like, take the pill and an ibuprofen, and if you're still complaining, we'll give you an antidepressant. And I'm like, that's shocking. That's
not enough.
Shocking.
I know.
Well, this is a theme that's come up a lot. I when I was in Holland recently last week, I was speaking to like multiple people. It wasn't necessarily related to this, but multiple people with debilitating issues who I all wanted to say, go fucking try something else, please. Like, it was really hard for me to be with them and them suffering and go, the doctor says there's nothing to be done. And I'm like, maybe go to someone else. Maybe find a Chinese medicine person, an Ayurvedic person, go fucking craniosacral therapy. No, that stuff. Exactly. No, that stuff doesn't exist. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to leave now because you're just there with your suffering, and you're saying this like you've been taught so effectively that your suffering is incurable, that you're now gonna be with your suffering that way. And then the thing you were saying about the debt of gratitude, I think that's 100% true, because that's a positive thing to go, oh, these indigenous cultures have given us so much. I don't think ever it's anything like, I hate when people go, oh, it should be limited. Or I saw some post recently of, I don't know what the holiday was, but it was something like, if you're in say it's Chinese New Year or whatever.
I think it actually was Chinese New
Year.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about. where someone said something like, you can only celebrate this if you are Chinese or if it's been approved by someone Chinese. I'm like,
I know that if this is the one I'm thinking of, the top tweet reply to that was a person going, I'm Irish and I'm wishing everyone around the world a happy Halloween. Go nuts with Samhain.
But this is it. This kind of thing of like, no, it does not belong to you. It drives me insane. I mean, can we use Bluetooth, or do we have to be fucking Swedish for that shit? Like, I love going, respect to those cool people who came up with that. I love that. But that restrictive fucking thing, go fuck yourself.
Well, the other thing I find, and this is getting very tangential, but the tricky to navigate, but I think essential to navigate, right? I went to China, I learned Chinese medicine there, which I think is a very good place to learn Chinese medicine, obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't practice it there. And I don't treat many Chinese people. I treat Western people in a Western culture using the practice, the very ancient and well-developed practice of another culture. I will have to modify it, right? And I will have to find out ways that it can best serve, firstly, that I can practice it most effectively as somebody who isn't Chinese, and that my patients can connect with it and receive it most effectively. And I think how you do that is going to be different for everyone and different for every practice. And I think I think a lot of people jump in too soon. They're like, oh, I did 6 weeks in an ashram. I'm now a shit hot yoga teacher, or whatever it is, I think just recognizing where you are, hewing as close as you can to the way things have been done by that culture. And if you are going to change something about how Chinese medicine or any kind of other indigenous practice is done, you should have a pretty good reason for it. Like, if it's just like, oh, I feel this is a bit difficult, no, you should be like, why do they do it this way?
But that has to do with using a system properly as well. It's not just like, I just don't like all that cultural appropriation speak, because I think I'm sure there is some value in it, but I just think all that, when it's used limitingly, I'm always like, let's try to be one human race,
well,
please.
I think in many contexts, it's a way of it's a way into another culture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would never have learned as much about China or Asia if I wasn't interested.
And it also helps
stuff.
you come back to your own culture, I think, too. I think
Yes.
it's a lot about like intentionality. And something like cultural appropriation is something I've always been very hyper aware of, and almost like the other side of things where I feel like, oh God, I can't do anything because I'm a white woman.
But then it's crippling.
But then who am I going to help then? But
Exactly.
I think I was very blessed to have learned through a lot of Indigenous voices about the work that I do now, and it was taught in a very very respectful way and very in tune, like very really bowing to the lineage, and that's always been through it. So I carry that all the time. So I think reverence to the lineage that you learn from is really important, and intentionality that you bring to something. I think, cultural appropriation is when you take something like, if I started doing what I do and call it the Aisling Browne method. that's
trademarked.
That's stealing someone else. That's not. Yeah. But when you're training something in a very authentic way, and you carry it back to your own culture and you deliver it in a very authentic, like we're always very mindful of what we're doing and that we're supporting both the lineage and the people that we work with. I think that's really important.
You've countered that beautifully, actually, because sometimes I get a bit annoyed at things and I go fuck yourself or whatever.
You're in your wild woman phase, Bart, so this
I'm going to fight you.
Like living in New Zealand, sorry, go on.
No, well, I was just going to say you nailed it, because actually that is right. That is the reason people do worry about that, is you do need to bow to lineage. I agree with you. I just don't like that crippling. I don't like the finger wagging thing when people are like...
It often comes from someone who's not from that lineage.
Exactly. It's always someone else who's like really unsure of themselves about, you shouldn't be doing that. Whereas it's like when I was taught Reiki by our friend Sonia O'Brien, I love that they go, this is your lineage. She's like, this is the person who thought of this particular form of Reiki, and then it was taught to that person, and that person taught it to Sonia, and Sonia taught it to you. Yeah. That's cool. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I think I was just going to say that like learning about other cultures also helps us come back to our own culture. So just my own personal experience, like living in New Zealand for so long, and like I was teaching in schools there. So I remember my first day I was in a school with a lot of Maori students, and it was assembly hall, and I was waiting, standing around listening to assembly. So I kind of leaned against the table. And I was like, I'll just sit up here, it's comfier. So I sat on the table, and then the teacher's like, get off the table.
Can't do that.
Like tables are tapu, which means like sacred, like because you eat on a table, so you never would sit on a table.
Cool.
And I felt mortified, but also so grateful. That was my first week teaching, and I learned that lesson quickly. But I think like learning from Indigenous people in New Zealand about what their rituals were, what they like, and especially about menstruation, it made me appreciate their culture and also their language, and how they view and how they want to keep their culture alive. And they have to it's so it's such an active thing in their world, in their even politics, just to keep their identity so strong. And it made me realize and think back to Ireland, being like, oh my God, we have our Irish language. That's so important. We have our Irish culture. We have our land and our sacred sites. So I have such a huge appreciation for that now that I'd never had in my 20s before I left here. So I think that's I
think it's almost like the Síle gig.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's archetypal. It's underneath this, and you can find it those archetypes in other and sometimes more easily in other cultures.
Yeah, because it's more visible to you, because it's maybe a bit more colourful for you.
And I think in Ireland, like we have place is so important. I think you might have touched on this one of your season 1 podcast episodes of like
when
place.
You were still listening.
But I was listening. Before I got busy with season 2. Yeah. But like land is sacred. Land has spirit. Land has like power. So when you come to a place in Aotearoa, New Zealand, like you ask permission to be there, and you feel like the ancestors are there. They're holding the land. So I think I never used to really get that before about Ireland, but now I feel that. Like you go to certain like fairy forts or holy wells, and you can feel the presence of the land, and you seek permission to be there, and I think that's really really 100%. Powerful.
Absolutely. Well, Aisling, that was fascinating. I have the most interesting series of notes.
Great.
Here.
And a few books. You wrote down all the literature for us to read. Yeah,
I've got my homework to do as well.
Excellent.
So thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
That was lovely.
And anyone that's interested in Aisling, all her socials and all that stuff will be in the episode description. And you're doing your workshops and you're doing all this stuff. So I'm sure there's going to be people listening that probably might have a few questions for you, Aisling, as well. And I highly encourage anyone that's interested.
Yeah, and I will also finish by saying Aisling is absolutely wonderful. So if you are a bit worried, because I do think that's actually something I wrote down, worried, I think this is tender territory. But you're so gentle and lovely that I think you will be able to guide them. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I think there's someone listening that I think you will be able to guide them lovingly and gently. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been honored to be here. Thank you so much. And honored to do this work and hold, like you said, it's an honor to be with a woman in this way and hold space for her. So I take that very seriously. So thank you. Thanks, guys. It was great.
Thanks, Aisling.
Thanks for talking about periods for 2 hours. Super.
This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on all the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.